The Abernathy Files. Episode 3, The Path to the Forbidden, a story by Carl Otto. The morning light filtered softly through the window of Peggy Abernathy's bedroom, casting a warm glow that barely penetrated the shroud of unease weighing heavily in the air. Millbrook was silent in the aftermath of the chaos, the echoes of that horrific night lingering in the corners of every room in shadow. Outside, the leaves rustled gently in the crisp autumn air, a sharp contrast to the turmoil within her heart. Peggy sat at her old desk, where countless hours had been spent completing homework assignments and daydreaming about the future. Now, it stood cluttered with remnants of a reality turned upside down, scattered notebooks filled with frenzied notes, a leather-bound book that exuded an otherworldly energy, and a half-finished cup of cold coffee that had long since lost its appeal. She stared at the book, its cover etched with arcane symbols, drawing her in with an unyielding pull. Closing her eyes for a moment, Peggy took a deep breath, attempting to gather her thoughts. Images of her father's worried face, the frantic chaos of the church, the mist that swallowed not just the night, but also the people who had vanished into it, flooded her mind. Tom's laugh echoed faintly, a haunting reminder of the last time she felt safe. Now she mourned not only for him, but for the countless others whose absence had forged a rift in the town's fabric. Each breath felt heavier as she reflected on the chilling fact that several families were still waiting for news, holding on to hope that those lost somehow survived. But Peggy knew better. She understood the events of Halloween had changed this town and her forever. And at the center of it all lay the cult that had spiraled her life into chaos. With a renewed sense of determination, Peggy opened the leather book, its pages whispering with the secrets of centuries. She recalled the old woman's haunting words, how the veil between worlds thinned and shadows crept forth. What was she meant to unveil? Which direction will she go from these fragments and clues? Determined to forge ahead, Peggy turned her attention to the pages, tracing her fingers over the incantations and spells inscribed within. They felt alive, pulsating with power, a power that hinted at answers she so desperately sought. Clarity and confusion danced in her mind, battling for dominance. But one thing was certain: she could no longer be a passive observer in this unfolding nightmare. She has to take an active role and find answers. Peggy leaned forward, her heart racing, and began to sift through the pages of the leather-bound book. It smelled ancient, the scent of worn parchment and secrets lingering in the air. She flipped through the delicate pages, each turn revealing a new glimpse into a world that felt both foreign and terrifyingly familiar. Her gaze caught on an illustration of a figure cloaked in shadows, surrounded by swirling mists. Invocation of Revelation, it was labeled. The lines of the illustration seemed to ripple as if alive, beckoning her to dive deeper. With each spell she read, the weight of her purpose began to settle in. She reached for a well-worn notebook and started jotting down the names of the rituals and symbols she found alongside the descriptions. Her pen scratched across the paper, the rhythm steadying her racing thoughts. As she read about simple invocations and intricate rituals, Peggy felt the book's power resonate within her. The allure of knowledge called to her, a siren song that promised answers to the chaos swirling around her. She noted a few spells designed to seek understanding, each one more complex than the last. Among them, some mentioned the cult of Drevar and their intentions, revealing cryptic phrases that hinted at dark, unfulfilled desires and ancient rites performed in the shadows. Could this really be related to Millbrook? She murmured to herself, flipping through the pages until she found a section entitled Echoes of the Past. Distant whispers grabbed her attention, pulling her down a rabbit hole of historical accounts laced with tragedy. Rituals gone awry, and the toll they exacted on the town and its people. Some notes seemed to reference unexplained phenomena and events that coincided with arcane happenings mentioned throughout the book. Peggy's heart quickened as she absorbed every detail, information she had long suspected but never fully understood. It all felt too interconnected, as if she were grasping the frayed edges of some immense tapestry of horror. Suddenly, a passage caught her eye, its words flickering with latent energy. In times of great distress, when the veil thins and the night whispers secrets, the key to understanding lies beneath the earth, buried where shadows recede. Her breath caught in her throat. A handwritten note in the margin captured her attention. It simply read, 303 Maple Street? With urgency filling her chest, Peggy quickly grabbed a worn map of Millbrook from a nearby drawer. She spread it out on her cluttered desk, the familiar lines of the town's roads unfurling before her. Her eyes darted across the map until she located Maple Street, a small, unassuming road that wound through a quiet part of town. As she traced her finger along the mapping lines, she noted that 303 Maple Street was only a short distance from Main Street, not far from her own home. Her heart raced with anticipation. Each piece of information felt like a puzzle snapping into place, giving her purpose. Perfect, she whispered to herself, folding the map and tucking it into her jacket pocket. Just as she was about to step out, the sound of her mother's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Peggy!" her mother called, entering the room with a furrowed brow. "Where are you going?" "I'm just heading out, Mom," Peggy said casually, although her heart raced. "Just heading out?" Her mother stepped closer, arms crossed tightly. "You know how I feel about you going out alone right now, especially with everything that's happened. The missing people, Peg. It worries me." Peggy took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I'll be fine, Mom. I just need to—" "No, you listen to me." Her mother's voice sharpened, an edge of control creeping in. "You can't keep doing this. You don't know how dangerous it is out there. Everyone's on edge, and with Tom missing, I just can't bear the thought of losing you." "Mom, I'm not going far." Peggy tried to keep her tone even, not wanting to provoke her mother's fears. "I just need some fresh air." "Fresh air? I don't want you wandering around town, especially not alone," her mother insisted, worry deepening in her expression. "I know you need to get some air, but I want you to be safe first." Peggy felt a tug of guilt at her heart. "I understand, but I really need to go out, just for a bit. I'll be careful, I promise." Her mother softened momentarily, but the concern lingered. "You can't take unnecessary risks, Peggy. Please just promise me you'll check in. Call me if you need me to come get you, okay?" "I will, Mom," Peggy promised, though her mind was already racing ahead, thinking of the secrets waiting to be uncovered. With a tender hug, her mother stepped back, reluctantly allowing Peggy to continue on her path. As she stepped outside into the cool autumn air, the weight of the leather-bound book felt reassuring, steadier than her trembling hands. The names of the missing townsfolk echoed in her thoughts, adding weight to her resolve. She wouldn't be able to sleep at night until she sought the truth, no matter how dark or devastating it proved to be. As she walked toward Maple Street, shadows lurked in the corners of her vision, whispering secrets she couldn't quite grasp. Steeling herself for the unknown, she pressed on. With every step, the weight of the secrets she sought pressed down on her. It was as if Millbrook itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would uncover. When she turned onto Maple Street, the surroundings shifted. The pleasant homes gave way to older buildings, the shadows deepening as the sun dipped lower behind the horizon. Peggy glanced at the map, tucked securely in her pocket, its lines etched in her mind like a guiding star. Finally, she arrived at 303 Maple Street, an old two-story building that felt out of place among its well-kept neighbors. The windows were coated in a layer of dust, and the wooden sign above the door, creaking slightly in the autumn breeze, read, "Garrett's Used and Rare Books." Peggy felt a shiver run down her spine. It was as if she had stepped into a different time. As she approached, Peggy was met with an unsettling quiet. The door, worn by time, stood firmly shut. She tried the handle, but it refused to budge, locked against her. A sense of urgency rose within her. She had come too far to turn back now. Peggy glanced around, her imagination racing. Perhaps there was another way in, something hidden from sight. She moved along the side of the building, her heart pounding as she scanned for any signs of entry. As she reached the back, she noticed a small window, framed by ivy and neglect. The glass was grimy, and she could barely see through it, but it was slightly ajar, just enough to give her a glimmer of hope. Taking a deep breath, she glanced around to ensure no one was watching. With determination fueling her, she approached the window and carefully pushed it open, feeling a rush of excitement and dread wash over her. The air buzzed with energy, remnants of magic both enticing and foreboding. She climbed through, the narrow opening barely accommodating her shoulders. Tiny specks of debris swirled in the weak sunlight as she slipped into the shadowy space, a musty smell of aged paper and leather enveloping her senses. Once inside, Peggy steadied herself, listening for any signs of life. The room was dark, illuminated only by slivers of light trickling through the gaps in the shuttered windows. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books that seemed to whisper among themselves, ancient secrets hidden within their pages. Peggy's heart raced as she stepped forward, the atmosphere thick with a sense of purpose. She had managed to break in, but she was acutely aware that time was of the essence. The answers she sought were here, buried beneath stacks of history. Now she had to find them. Moving cautiously through the narrow aisles, Peggy called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Her voice sounded distant, swallowed by the cavernous room. Silence answered. Peggy's heart raced as she stepped deeper into the shadows, the musty smell of old books mingling with the uncanny stillness that filled the shop. She could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes watching her from the shelves, ancient secrets preserved within the pages. Determined to uncover whatever truths lay hidden, Peggy continued her search. Her eyes flicked to the faded photographs and eclectic trinkets lining the shelves, each one a testament to the stories told and untold within this bookstore. Just as she turned to explore another aisle, she caught sight of a staircase leading up, partially obscured by a mountain of old boxes. Without hesitation, she moved toward it, her curiosity piqued. Climbing the creaking stairs, Peggy felt both excitement and trepidation in equal measure. There was something about the apartment above that beckoned her, a feeling that perhaps it held answers or even a connection to the cult she was investigating. As she reached the top, a door with a simple brass knob stood before her. She hesitated for a moment, her heart thumping in her chest. What if Mr. Garrett is dangerous, she thought. But her resolve steeled. She had to know. With a deep breath, Peggy knocked gently. After a brief moment of silence, she slowly opened the door. A man that looked like Mr. Garrett, but far older, lay on the floor dressed in the same cloak as the cult members. His face was gaunt, lined with weariness, and his eyes held a flicker of recognition that sent chills down her spine. "Peggy Abernathy," he rasped. "I've seen you before." "Mr. Garrett," she replied, a mix of relief and worry flooding through her. "What happened to you? You were there, that night." His expression darkened, beckoning her inside. "You shouldn't linger here," he warned, but there was a strange intensity in his gaze. "There are things you do not understand." Peggy stepped into the small apartment, taking in the clutter of books and various trinkets that whispered of a time long past. "I need to know," she pressed, sensing the urgency in his demeanor. "That ritual you were doing, what was it? What happened?" As he closed the door, Garrett steadied himself against the wall, clutching his side. Peggy caught sight of a dark stain seeping through his shirt, and her heart sank. The ritual. "We opened a door to something beyond our comprehension," he murmured, his voice thick with regret. "When the Murphy boy shot, we lost control. I was injured, and now the mist has corrupted me." His eyes darkened with anguish. "It pulls me in a piece at a time." "What do you mean?" Peggy demanded, taking a step closer, fear and concern mingling within her. "I saw it," he said, eyes widening with the recollection. "The true horror on the other side of the rift. We thought we could control it, but we were wrong. That night, many were lost, but I linger still, tainted by the darkness." His voice broke, and Peggy felt a wave of sympathy wash over her. "What can I do to help you?" she asked, desperate to understand. He leaned forward, the shadows stretching ominously around him. "The wound is a rift. It grows with each passing moment. I can feel it consuming me, tainting my blood with darkness." He paused, the weight of his admission resting heavily in the air. "But you must learn." "Learn what?" Peggy asked, urgency lacing her voice. "There are ways to protect yourself and the town." His face was covered in sweat, and he groaned in pain as he continued. "You need to know, in the silence where shadows dwell, bind the light to break the spell. Use it wisely." Before she could respond, his body convulsed, and the wound seemed to pulse in rhythm with the dark energy surrounding him. "The spirit is clever. It will not let you ease the bindings without a cost." "Wait, don't," she protested, but he was fading, a look of fear and resignation on his face. "No." As he spoke, a final surge of energy erupted from the wound, and with a horrific scream, he was consumed by shadows that snaked out from the gaping wound. In that moment, Peggy felt a wave of cold wash over her, overwhelming her senses as the reality of what unfolded crashed upon her. Breathless, she stumbled back, her heart racing as she processed what had just happened. "No, no!" she cried out, looking down at the now silent form of Mr. Garrett, the only remnant of his existence a swirling mist that seemed to collapse into itself and then into nothingness. She turned back towards the staircase and rushed down back to the shop. She leaned against a bookshelf, trying to keep herself from hyperventilating. "Breathe, Peggy, just breathe," she thought to herself. Suddenly, something caught her attention, a strange section of the floor near the back of the store. An old rug pushed to the side, exposing strange, odd wooden planks that shifted slightly underfoot, as if they were hiding something. The sensation of magic was stronger here, coating the air with an electric hum. She approached carefully and crouched down to examine the area more closely. Her heart raced. Pulling back the rug, she noticed that the floorboards appeared different. Newer wood, perhaps, or simply polished from frequent movement. "Is this some sort of hiding place?" she wondered aloud, her breath catching in her throat. Peggy ran her fingers along the edges of the floorboards and detected a slight seam. Thinking quickly, she pressed down and suddenly felt a mechanism click beneath her touch. With a low groan, a section of the floor slowly lifted to reveal a hidden trapdoor. Peggy's heart thudded loudly in her chest. This was it. Whatever lay beneath this door could finally provide the answers she sought. Peggy lifted the trapdoor and peered into the dimly lit space below. A narrow staircase spiraled down into darkness, the air cool and damp, wrapping around her like an embrace, both comforting and foreboding. For a moment, she hesitated, the weight of the leather-bound book in her hands serving as a reminder of her purpose. With a resolute nod, Peggy reached for a switch on the wall near the staircase, her heart racing with anticipation. The moment she flicked the switch, a dim light flickered to life, casting an eerie glow down the narrow staircase. Shadows danced along the walls, and the soft hum of electricity filled the air. Taking a deep breath, she descended the staircase, each creaking step echoing in the quiet. The scent of earth and something faintly metallic tickled her nostrils, heightening her senses. As she continued down, the light illuminated the path ahead, but the shadows clung to the corners, twisting and shifting in the periphery of her vision, making it difficult to discern what lurked within the darkness. Once at the bottom, Peggy found herself in a chamber that felt ancient and heavy with secrets. The walls, damp and lined with dark stone, were covered in strange symbols that seemed to twist and writhe when she looked at them too long. In the center stood an altar, worn and etched with the same arcane designs she had seen in the book. Her breath hitched as she approached the altar, instinctively feeling that she was stepping onto sacred ground where dark rituals had once occurred. The book's energy thrummed in her hands, urging her to explore and understand the mysteries contained within these walls. As she examined the altar, Peggy noticed a circle of old candles. Their wax dripped and hardened over time. Were these used in rituals? She wondered aloud, running her fingers along the smooth surface. Her heart raced with anticipation, her wide eyes darting around the chamber, eager to uncover its secrets. In the dim light, a glint caught her eye, drawing her attention to a small iron chest tucked away against the wall. Curiosity sparked within her, and she approached it cautiously. "What do I have here?" she murmured, kneeling next to the chest to inspect it more closely. The iron was cold beneath her fingertips, its surface rough and pitted with age. She searched for a lock, but there was none. Just a simple latch. With a deep breath, Peggy pulled it open, the hinge creaking. Inside lay an assortment of items, an old revolver, its barrel tarnished but still gleaming with potential, dozens of coins made of gold and silver, several of pieces of jewelry, their edges dulled by time, and a stack of neatly bundled savings bonds, their worth in the tens of thousands at least. Her breath quickened. "What is all of this doing down here?" Peggy whispered, unsure whether to feel excitement or trepidation. This discovery hinted at the cult's resources, but also suggested they had maintained a certain veil of normalcy to conceal their true actions. Peggy rummaged through the contents of the chest, then a chill gripped her. The atmosphere around her seemed to shift, light dimming, as if the very air was thickening. Shadows deepened, and the temperature dropped suddenly, causing her to shiver involuntarily. She left the chest and turned to the walls, scanning the room for any clues or remnants that could shed light on the cult's activities. Drawings etched into stone appeared to be both ritualistic and chaotic, figures intertwined with twisting vines, eyes wide and mouths open as if in screams. Peggy's pulse quickened as she recognized the imagery. These were echoes of the cult's dark practices, manifestations of their rituals. She swallowed hard, feeling an inexplicable pull towards the drawings, a magnetic force urging her to understand. As she scanned the walls, she recalled something from the book, a passage about guardian spirits summoned to protect a space from intruders, to ward off those who sought to trespass. They guard against thieves and enemies, she recalled, her heart racing with both apprehension and resolve. If it saw her as an intruder, what would their response be? Suddenly a whisper filled the chamber, a voice that felt familiar, yet distinctly otherworldly. Who are you?" It hissed, echoing off the stone walls. The sound sent chills down her spine, its icy breath a palpable sensation that stabbed at her skin like 1,000 needles. "Guardian spirits, I mean no harm," Peggy pleaded softly, realizing the precarious nature of her presence here. "I seek only to understand what has happened, not to disrupt." "Leave now!" the voice commanded, a hint of authority threading through its tone. The warning resonated, echoing ominously as the air grew heavier around her, suffocating and charged with an unshakable dread. Peggy hesitated, her heart racing as the oppressive presence of the spirit intensified. "Show me," she demanded, tapping into her growing defiance. "Show me what happened here." The spirit's response was immediate and fierce, its voice a storm of fury that sent shockwaves reverberating through the chamber. "You do not belong here. This place is not for you. Leave!" The atmosphere shifted, and an icy gust swept through the room, wrapping around her like a serpent, squeezing the breath from her lungs. "I am bound to protect this place. Leave now, or rot on the floor where you stand." The spirit's wrath rattled the walls, as eerie winds howled, drowning out her thoughts while dark forms twisted in the corners of her vision, gripping her with fear and despair. "No, I have to know." The defiance surged within her, but she could feel the air thickening, pressing against her with a suffocating weight, making each breath a struggle. The spirit advanced, its energy coiling around her like an invisible noose. "You will regret your intrusion," it growled, causing the temperature in the chamber to plummet even further. The cold was now a penetrating ache that settled deep within her bones, robbing her of warmth and fear. "Stop! You cannot leave!" The spirit's voice roared, resonating with an undeniable force that threatened to crush her spirit. "I won't be afraid!" Peggy shouted back, though doubt clawed at the edges of her resolve. She could feel the icy tendrils wrapping around her, attempting to ensnare her and pull her into the dark corners of the room. She knew she had to escape, to reach the trapdoor, but the spirit loomed, its howling breath drawing closer and closer. In a moment of sheer desperation, she recalled Garrett's words, the key phrase that might grant her protection. She clutched the leather-bound book tightly, feeling its energy pulsing beneath her fingers. In a final act of defiance, as the spirit reared back to strike, Peggy shouted, "In the silence where shadows dwell, bind the light to break the spell." The impact was immediate. As if responding to her command, torches ignited in each corner of the room, igniting it in a brilliant golden glow. The warm light cut through the darkness, forcing the spirit to recoil, howling in betrayal as it was thrust back, losing its grip on reality. With the spirit momentarily banished, Peggy's heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, allowing her to breathe freely once more. Staying grounded, Peggy steadied herself against the altar, determination surging through her veins. She knew she had a precious window of time before the spirit could return. The newly lit torches flickered brightly, illuminating the chamber and casting away the beads of darkness. As the last echoes of the spirit's rage faded and the light of the torches flickered steadily around her, Peggy took a moment to breathe deeply, trying to steady her racing heart. The warm glow illuminated the chamber, revealing the intricate symbols and arcane designs etched into the cool stone walls. This was not just a space of darkness and terror, it was a repository of secrets waiting to be unraveled. Yet even as the oppressive atmosphere lifted, a wave of disbelief crashed over her. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins, tinged with shock at what she had just faced. "I actually did it," she thought, blinking rapidly as if in a dream. One wrong move, and she could have been consumed by the very darkness she sought to understand. Peggy stumbled back, her shoulders taut with tension. It can't be over, she thought frantically. Can it? The enormity of what she had confronted settled heavily upon her, her hands trembling as they brushed against the altar. After all that chaos, she felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion wash over her. A sobering realization dawned on her. She had narrowly escaped, yet the true battle was just beginning. As she steadied herself against the altar, she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the torches wrap around her like a protective embrace. The pulsating energy of the leather-bound book beneath her fingers reignited her resolve. There's more to uncover, she reminded herself, pushing through the lingering fear. Determined to make sense of everything, Peggy began her examination in earnest, moving methodically from the altar to the surrounding shelves. The pulse of the heart pounding in her chest began to calm as she pored over the scrolls and books she had gathered, her fingers still trembling, but now with a sense of purpose. Each passage revealed more about the cult's practices and the rift they had opened, the very rift that had cast its dark shadow over Millbrook. With each line she read, Peggy felt a greater sense of control returning, and she was no longer just a frightened girl caught in a nightmare. She was a seeker of truth, ready to confront the darkness that threatened her town.
Hey everybody, this is Carl. Thank you very much for sticking around and listening to my story. If you've stuck around and listened to all of it, I'm sure you have some thoughts. I'd love to hear them in the comment section. Did you like the story? Have you been listening to the entire series? Is it do you find it interesting? And if so, what are you looking forward to in the future? And just, what you liked and what you didn't like about the story. I still consider myself new to writing, and I'm always looking to improve. So until next time, you have a good day, and I'll catch you later.